evening. So I was just fiddling with my volume levels there. Let me know if the music's too loud. Maybe I'll turn it down a smidge. Yeah, that looks alright. Yeah, there is some cheesy lo-fi, but I try and turn it down so it's not too intrusive. Good, good. Yeah, I need to turn it up a bit, it's quite quiet. So, it's Wednesday, and Wednesday means Magellan Day. I think what we'll do is we'll continue what we were doing with the NPC task side of things. In fact, let's compile that. Find the right level. I think it was that one. I'm always early. What are you talking about? Yeah, so on the last Magellan stream, we were sorting out the ability for the ability for NPCs to proactively pick up objects, move them around the ship, and move shelving unit to shelving unit. Yes, Firstus, Claire did point that out. That's on my to-do list fix. Why do they have a box around them? Is it because I messed up the cable assignment? I bet it is. Yes, it is. Oh, of course, they're not splines anymore. That'll be why. Yeah, ignore that. Okay, so what I figured I'd do is start rolling some of this out. So we'll have a look at the storage rooms in the science labs and see whether we can start moving some cargo to the storage rooms in a live environment, which might mean making some shelves rather than using just some asset shelves. We'll make some proprietary ones that actually fit the shape we need, which means we don't want the Caravella. It is not the Caravella's day. YouTube seems to think it's alright. I'm not getting any warnings. Okay, so problem with my throat tonight for some reason. Losing my voice a bit. It was all that partying, obviously. So the plan was to not have the storage room immediately opening out onto the corridor, and to have it as part of the lab. I might change the shape of the labs a little bit at some point. I won't change it now, but at some point we might need to repartition this space. It's a really awkward shape to be working with at the best of times. So we need as many square sections as we can get. But, if we sort this out with a door maybe on this side, and then we'll need to do the same over on this side. I think they're okay, no, so they're not using the same group. Oh, okay, yeah, so this one's got a bulkhead, as does that one. Yeah, frustratingly, all three of these lab shapes have slightly different proprietary needs. Like this one's got a bulkhead here, whereas that one doesn't. And I think this one's got a slightly different corner on it, if I recall. There'll be something different about it. Could be the window section, actually. But yeah. But that's fine. Yeah, the round ship and all the funny shaped rooms do not make it easy to decorate. So yeah, so we're going to lose the door to the corridor for the storage rooms and make them part of the lab complex for each lab. And then we'll have probably a secure storage area and also a generalized storage area. So we're going to need to put a door in there, and I think we'll probably steal the one from B deck because that's on a straight wall already. B deck frame walls. Yeah, this one. To be honest, I need to split that into sections as well. Never rely on it to be exactly coplanar the way you want it to be. Then we'll have the opposing door on the other side. So we'll position that to wherever is most sensible, depending on the shelves and everything, so it can go anywhere really. Yeah, we need to get rid of this door here. And we can just rotate that around to fill the gap. Except that's not aligned, which doesn't help. Yep, that's better. I'll probably move the bathroom door maybe to the other side of the bulkhead, so that the bathroom door is not like immediately opposite the lab entrance. Oh, have a good one, League of Carnage. Hey Jason, we are sorting out the storage rooms in the labs, and then we are putting some shelves in, making sure that we measure the size of each shelving reserved space, so that we can kind of define the size of the props and kind of what the maximum prop size is going to be for the probes and that sort of thing. Obviously each item that we get with a probe needs to fit on a shelf, so we need probably a range of size scales, and then maybe we'll have shelving units that have different slots for different sizes. I suppose kind of inspired by the IKEA unit behind me. Turns out the Magellan Class is Swedish. Yeah, we'll do big to small from like bottom to top. Exactly, Jason, yeah. Maybe at some point. Yeah, when it comes to the exploration side of things, we want to sort of unravel things in layers. So the further from the object you are, the less information you'll have. So in order to get to, like, is there life on the surface of this planet, then you need to be in orbit of that planet to determine that. That's not something you'll see from a distance, unless it has tech signatures, in which case you'll see that at long range. Don't know yet, Puntloos, because we haven't actually finished one. So we've got 2 ships that are in progress. Depends on the size of the ship as well. So the Caravella, we've probably spent about, I'd say, 2 full weeks in terms of man hours. So I would say probably extending that out to the interior decoration, probably about 2 months worth of man hours seems about reasonable. For the Magellan, it'll be different because this thing's huge, so a lot longer. Okay, so the wall height is 260, but we've also got the drop from the ceiling, so 250 is probably our maximum usable space. I could do with my tape measure. I usually have a tape measure on my desk for this sort of thing, and I have, of course, used it elsewhere and then left it wherever that elsewhere was. I'm thinking probably 50 centimeters maybe for the larger objects. Yeah, probably not. We won't have anything as small as 10, I wouldn't have thought, unless we have like really tiny items. That's not its final location, Danger Mouse. We'll be moving it around, depending on where the shelves go. Stuff will be moved all over the place, as and when it's needed. So once things are brought into the lab, so there'll be a, I suppose we need a pending shelf, which we could potentially have in the lab itself, maybe. And then we have shelves for objects that have been fully scienced out. And at that point, I guess it's optional as to whether you keep it or whether you chuck it and recycle it. Yeah, we do need to have a think about that, about dangerous stuff, and contamination and that sort of thing. I'll see how we go with it. I mean, if we're doing real world health and safety, then yes, there would need to be some of that. But it's like, how much do we dial that back because it's a game? Like, we don't want like health and safety hell getting in the way of just having an enjoyable time in the game. Hey, welcome to the stream. Yeah, so working with squaring it off, obviously we want predominantly we want the shelves to be here, and what I might do is actually just square off that edge and maybe turn this side into a cupboard of sorts. To be honest, we could probably have a cupboard there if we square that off there. But let's see what that looks like if we do square it off. Yeah, so that would become our dedicated storage area, and then we can use this space here for either a cupboard on the inside there, or maybe just something there for storage. I suppose something we need actually is we need storage for like gas canisters and things. Obviously each room is supposed to be a self-contained like lifeboat type thing, where if vacuum, or if pressure is lost and you've got vacuum in the corridors, then the room is supposed to be a secure, airtight place where people can be safe until the corridors are repressurized. So the room itself needs oxygen stores and some CO2 scrubbers so that crew can survive in the room for an extended period of time. So cavities like this is exactly what we need for those gas canisters and any other support hardware that might be needed to keep the room ticking. Well, it would be a cupboard. Yeah, I would have thought so. I mean, yeah, the ship is designed to be pressure vessels. So, like, it's a honeycomb. So you'll notice that the gaps, or at least the openings in the wall cavities, are all on the corridor side, so that on the room side there are no holes going through. And when the ceiling's welded on, it's completely airtight. And every door is designed to be a pressure door, because it's a big ship. Rather than having like a bunker that the crew all heads to, all they need to do is secure the door, and then they're safe in that room for a good few hours if need be. Yeah, I like the I can't remember the name of it now. That chemical that strips CO2 out of the air, and then when you heat it, it releases it again. It's like metho something amine. Can't remember what it's called now. But yeah, that stuff. So just canisters of that bubbling away is all that's needed. Yeah, we could definitely have just like a survival cupboard, really, that just gives the crew everything they need for surviving in a room for as long as they need to, before the maintenance crew can get to them and let them out. In Star Trek, or at least in like the motion picture era, the corridors were supposed to have like little bunks that you can climb into. So like you open up the diagonal bit on the corridor, and you can literally like just roll into the corridor bit and seal yourself in there to stay safe. But I prefer the idea of people just hunkering down in a room where the room itself is safe. Anyway, back to shelving. That's the stuff, Seeker. Yeah. Yeah, monoethanolamine. That stuff. I almost had it. Ah. Yeah, exactly. So the point being is, if the corridor is compromised for some reason, then the room itself is what keeps you safe. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that we'd balance, in terms of the gameplay. How long are those rooms survivable in realistic terms? And obviously we'll balance that as needed. Yeah, I think any kind of survival gear needs to be available on hand. Um, wherever the crew are spending a lot of their time. Like the science staff on the ship are going to be spending the bulk of their time in the science labs. Although the same is true for crew quarters as well. So the crew quarters themselves are also survival bunkers. So again, if the corridor loses pressure, then you just need to stay in your crew quarters and wait it out. You will be safe there until rescued. Okay, so if we make that the base area, and then I guess if we go 2 meters in on each side, so we want to give the NPCs room to maneuver. Which room does that give us? Ooh, almost exactly what we want. Okay. So that's based on a shelving depth of 1/2 meter, which should be sufficient for most things. Yeah, it doesn't sound like a way I'd want to go. That's kind of a chilling thought. Like, at some point, there will be a human that was the first human to have died as a result of exposure to vacuum. Yep, true enough. Okay, so I need to even that out a bit, but that would be 3 lots of 50. Yeah, I'm just working out whether or not that would give us more or less space. To be honest, we'd have to sacrifice some of it. So if we actually, let's group that up a sec. Because you have to put one in the middle. Yeah, it's not about that though, it's about NPCs. NPCs need more room than the average human, because they are particularly dumb. Okay, yeah, well if we double them up that gives us an extra 2 shelves basically, which is a good thing. And we still have our space in between. We can probably average that out as well. Never work out how to partition off an area so we've got an equal distance between each one given the width to the center point. So if we've got 333 there, so we've got 200 exactly there, 241, that's on the edge. 233, so if I move it over 15 that way, and 15 that way, that should give us 215 there, 218, 218, 215, yeah, close enough. I see how well the NPCs traverse this gap here, but yeah. It should give us enough storage, at least in the short term. Because that's one of the questions really is, obviously we're going to be pulling up a lot of stuff from planetary surfaces, and we'll be collecting things in person, and if we go on an alien derelict, we'll probably be collecting stuff there as well. And it's like, then what do you do with it all? It's alright to stick it on a shelf, but at some point you're going to run out of shelves. So, yeah, we definitely need some way of recycling older stuff that you're not interested in anymore. The walls are shelves too. Yeah, could do. I think the easier thing is probably just recycling it, because we're going to be a fair old distance from Earth most of the time. If we go for 16 segments there, Right, so we've got 16 racks that way, times whatever, how many deep we make it there. So same on this side. Let's say 9 there. There. Yeah, it's not that kind of a rescue room. It's more a case of, and this applies to every single room on the ship, that if you're working in this lab and something happens, the corridor for some reason becomes inaccessible, then the idea is that the room is a pressure vessel and you're okay. So as long as you keep the door closed, you can survive in that room. It's got its own separate air supply, it's pressurized, and you've got many hours where you can await rescue. So it's not a place where you would be kipping for the night. It's a place where you can just, essentially, it's a way of just making sure the crew are safe during their working day if something bad happens. Again, if the hull is punctured, if pressure is lost to part of the deck, if you're in a room, you're okay, essentially. And again, that applies to crew quarters as well. So it doesn't matter what room you're in on the ship, all of the rooms are capable of being pressure vessels and keeping the crew safe. Turn the middle one 90 degrees. Right, you mean like that, and then move it over. Thing is, you're surrounded by shelves, so these are shelves too. So you need to be able to walk all the way around all of these, because you're literally surrounded by shelves. Yes, PSV, these are pressure doors here, so every single corridor is filled with them. Like, there's one there, there's one there, there's one there. Literally every single segment of corridor has a bulkhead. So bulkhead, bulkhead, and around there, bulkhead. So we can section off all those areas. And again, it's pressurized, so like the walls are split into basically a honeycomb, and wherever we have utilities running through, there'll be like a rubber bulkhead, basically, making sure that pressure is maintained. Yeah, they're just standard bulkhead doors. What's going on there? Oh, I see. Yeah, we'll have a separate area for that. I mean, for the most part, in most of the labs at least, we're not going to have things which are overly hazardous. And the other thing with that is that I guess you need to think about how those objects are handled, because if you're bringing something up in a pod and that thing is hazardous in some way, then how do you get it from like the probe room to the safe storage in the lab? So you have to have procedures in place to handle all of that as well. And I think ultimately that's just beyond the scope of the game. And you know, as much as we try and design it as if it were real as much as possible, you know, we have to maintain the fact that this is also just a game. So you know, obviously there's only so far the scope will go. Yes, PSV, anything on the ship can be sabotaged or go faulty. Every single piece of hardware will be vulnerable in some way or another. Okay, so see, already that's a lot of storage. Like a lot of storage. So we'd have to number every single shelf. Probably give each one a label. Just thinking the best way of managing this from a usability and addressing perspective. So obviously we need the NPC to stand in given locations. So we'll have set locations where the NPC will stand in terms of interacting with the shelf. Might be able to glean that from the shelf location, to be honest. Because if we can project onto the nav mesh, then we can just find the closest point on the nav mesh to the shelf. To the item on the shelf and do it that way. We just don't want them standing on the wrong side of the shelf to take it off. And then we'll make them nicely built in so they kind of fit the aesthetic. Can do, yeah. Yes, PSV. So, as part of the game's lore, there is a human organisation which is kind of objecting to the notion of humanity going out there and exploring the stars. Their rationale is that it's inevitable that the human race will come across a hostile alien species which will, in the long run, bring about the destruction of mankind. And you know, that's kind of what happens. So they're not wrong in many ways. So they make every effort to sabotage the mission to stop it from going ahead. You Obviously, they are a humanitarian organization, so they're not out there to harm humans. So they're not like causing terrorist acts or anything like that. But they're sabotaging the ship to make the mission not possible. So they will go around and disable bits of hardware. Just put the spanner in the works as much as they can to prevent the mission from happening. So that will come into part of the internal security gameplay. And the way it's going to work from a player's perspective is that there will be a sabotage option on literally everything. So as much as you can go and use a repair tool to repair something, in addition to that, you'll also have the option to sabotage something. And when you perform an act of sabotage, there will be like a background counter that counts down. And if you're performing acts of sabotage too frequently, then the chance of you leaving evidence behind will grow and grow. And of course, whoever's in the internal security role using the security tool will be able to see, okay, the evidence has been left behind by a saboteur, and now we know who it was. So it's going to be a balancing act between sabotaging the ship to stop it from working, but not so often that you've left evidence behind that it was you. It's quite basic gameplay, but it kind of ticks the box of having that kind of gameplay in the game. Yeah, basically. It's not going to be a game mode as such. We'll probably leave it to players to just do that from a roleplay perspective. So it's not going to be like Among Us where you start a game and someone's randomly selected as a saboteur and that's a set game mode. It won't be anything like that. It's just a case of, as part of the roleplay suite of tools, the ability to be a saboteur is just one of the capabilities that's there. We could certainly implement it as an isolated game mode, but it's kind of not what our game's about. So as much as we want to include the ability for players to create Among Us type gameplay, that's kind of not what our game is focused on. So if you want to do it, then we'll provide the tools for you to do it, but we're not going to be making an actual dedicated game mode for it, if that makes sense. I didn't, Delta. I shall have a quick look. Oh, right, I see. Alright, well, that's not terribly big. Yeah, I guess we'll just go around clockwise. So I guess start from there, go around, and then shelf, 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 shelf. So I kind of need to make this look somewhat like an IKEA unit without looking like an IKEA unit. Oh, see you, Danger Mouse. Have a good one. Okay, Delta, thank you. Yeah, I imagine we'll have it so that if you press the control panel for basically locking down the room, then it will close off the standard vents for the HVAC system, and instead it will switch to its own internal supply. So we'll have, you know, a reasonably large oxygen tank in the room, and a scrubber system, so that will keep the room going for a couple of hours. But we'll have that on the door UI. So yeah, if something bad happens, then someone needs to run over to the UI and just hit the button to lock the room down. Yeah, numbering makes sense. But yeah, so from a code perspective, obviously we will add all that to an array. So the array index will form the label. In fact, we can probably pull the label text off of the array index. I guess we'll also apply text labels. We'll have to see how performant that is, because it might be somewhat performance intensive to have actual text labels spawning on all of them, but we'll see. It'll certainly be a lot more immersive to see text labels on them. Right, so what's this giving us? 1, 2, 3, 4 and a bit, because that doesn't give us the full height there. Unless we also cap height on objects. Or we make it just 4 rather than 5 high, which might be easier. Yeah, it's more an immersion thing. I mean, if each of these cubbies is labelled, each pigeonhole has a label, then you can be told to fetch something from a certain address, and then we can track that in code, so we know where things are. So if we're generating a task, much in the same way that you know, if there's a fault on a given corridor segment, every corridor segment has an ID. So the fault report that you're looking at will have the ID of the corridor segment on it. So if you don't want to use the like the UI breadcrumb trail, then you can just look at the fault report number and, you know, roleplay your way to it. But a similar thing in here, where it can be a case of go and fetch item in storage shelf X, Y, and Z. So again, from a roleplay perspective, you've got the actual location of the item you're going to find. And I guess from a record keeping perspective, you'd want to know where everything is. Yeah, I'll do away with the top one. It's true. Claire can't reach anything with that stool. Yeah, so we move that one up. That makes that one not high enough. So 5, 5. Raise that up 0.1. So we can also, if we wanted to, put little doors on these and have them as actual secured cubbies. So they don't necessarily all have to be completely open. We could have a section that does have doors, but again, they don't all necessarily need to be the same size moving forward. We could potentially split this again down the middle for smaller objects if need be. Good old Chris. Yeah, see, he could reach that. Well, we'll just forget the fact there's nothing in the corner there and stick to the set-sized cubby. rather than making a new one, I may as well use the one I've got, because it's already a component. Assuming autosave lets me. But remember, it also needs to be convenient. So obviously part of this is, this is the day job of the science crew. So taking objects out of storage, working on them and putting them back is something you'll be doing all day long. It doesn't need to be like a heavily secured area. There's nothing secret being stored in here as such. Yeah, remember, some of it's just going to be like rocks, just rows upon rows of rocks and plants and just stuff that's been brought up from a planet. I can see them, Delta. Oh. Don't know why. Hey, Sirius. Yeah, we'll readjust shelving sizes as need arises. To begin with, this is just prototyping the system as a whole. You know, how are we getting this stuff in here? And see, I've immediately realised that we need to leave a 5 centimetre gap away from this wall for the support bracket, so this already needs moving, but still, for now, it's a decent test. There's definitely a lot of storage. So I'll just have to see whether or not the game can cope with that many props all stuffed into boxes. Should be alright. I mean, once they're there, they're essentially static items, so as long as nothing touches them, they shouldn't simulate physics. Yes, never miss out Gordon's leg. Absolutely. Yeah, but we want to keep the same... Oh no, not a 2D object. Now, we want to keep them the same, so that when you actually look at the shelves, you can see all the items you've collected. So we won't collapse them to just generic boxes. But we can disable physics and generally optimize that. So 10 is too many. What about 9? How many do we get there? Oh, closer. Let's try 8. Just trying to get the gap between them to be as close to 50 as possible. It's closer. Okay, so that is many, many shelf holes. Yes, Sirius. So one of the things that I wanted to do is start testing out the ability for the NPCs to pick things up and move them around the ship. So we need to have a look at what the storage situation looks like done to scale properly. we need to have a look at whether or not the scale that we're using here is a sufficient size. I mean, we've gone with 50 centimeter boxes, but that's probably not even going to fit the pumpkin, so we'll see. Because the size of the shelf really defines the size of the object that we're bringing up from surfaces. So we need to make sure that we assign a size class. I guess we'll do like just small, medium and large, keep it simple. And then we need to make sure that we've got small, medium and large shelving spaces for those objects. Like we could dedicate, say, these shelves either side of the door just for small objects, which means we could have a lot more shelving here than, say, at the back, which we could use for larger objects. But yeah, we will see once we get it in game. So on that note, suppose each one of these, in fact this entire shelving unit probably needs to be a blueprint class in its own right, because we need to track yeah, definitely serious. It never really made sense to have it on the corridor. Yeah, so we need the blueprint class to track every single shelf hole, so that it knows what we've actually got in here in terms of stored items, and when an NPC comes in to drop something off, it needs to know where the empty shelving units are. So the blueprint that we create for this, like we did with these ones, obviously needs like a little indicator for every single shelf, and then we'll have a cube in that just checking for overlaps so that we know that something's in there or not. And if we check for overlaps, that means we don't need to manage the player putting things there. So all the player has to do is simply put the item on the shelf, and then the overlaps will take care of everything else. It will automatically be added to the system, and then the shelf will know that the object is there just by virtue of the fact that the player's put it on the shelf, because it's now overlapping that cube. It won't be a matrix, it will be an array. Oh, definitely Benedict, yeah. So, like, all the crew quarters are going to have shelving for that very purpose. So, when you're done sciencing an object, the idea is either you can recycle it and reclaim its materials, or you can just take it somewhere and stick it on a shelf. I really wanted to have that kind of freedom of action within the game, where I'm always putting myself in the perspective of someone on the crew. Like, if I was there for real, what would I want to do? And then I need to make sure that the game is capable of doing that thing. So the general rule of thumb we've gone with is, if you can do it for real in the real world, then you should be able to do it in the game. So, you know, if in the real world I would pick up an object, stick it on a shelf because I think it looks cool. So if I can do that in the real world, then obviously we want to do that in the game as well. It's a long-winded way of saying yes. Right, so in that case then we need to... We're going to have to do a negative scale on half of the shelving units to do the layouts, which Unreal's never a fan of, but we shall try it and see. I think I will also do a center partition on this, because we want to make sure that objects that are placed are only going in the designated pigeonhole. Betterer. When we put these in properly with the actual wall bracing, I'll stick a back on them as well, like with those ones. Right, so which one is this? This is sea deck aft walls. So if we export this one then. Ring 2, framework. Don't have it as an FBX, so hang on, let's grab the name a minute. I think that's the way around I did it. Yeah, Unreal doesn't do multi-dimensional arrays. If we want to do anything like that, we need to use a struct. Yeah, and if you grab an object, then yes, it will have physics at that point. I'm going to store this under technology. Basically anything that's a custom mesh for the particular ship. I'll stick it in that folder just to keep it somewhere organized. So I suppose another point that's worth bringing up with this is that different labs need different kinds of storage. So whilst a geology lab is quite happy with a bunch of shelves, I suppose for things like oceanography, you're going to need a bunch of tanks, and like the botany storage is probably going to be different again, because I suppose botany storage is going to require things like lighting, and maybe some kind of watering system. I might have like botany canisters. So in the same way that we'd have oceanography canisters, where we'd have a canister of whatever the sample was, I think we'll do the same for botany as well, where we'll have like a built-in water system and grow light in the canister. So you just put the canister in the storage and it takes care of whatever's in it. So we were dealing with this one. So we need to re-import that with a new file, and that will be the one we just made. Okay, that gives us our nice square storage room. Then yeah, we'll move the doors for the bathroom and the storage room for like the robots and stuff. Move the doors to this side of the bulkhead, which keeps the labs on this side. I guess that's consistent all the way around then as well. Okay, so time to get rid of the nasty temporary shelving we had. Yep. Okay. I need to make sure the collision is good on this, because obviously we're using this for actual props. So if we check out our fallback mesh, which is going to be the collision mesh, they've moved everything. There we go. Does not look like the nanite fallback to me. Weird. That's the first time I've ever seen the nanite fallback mesh basically not destroy any face. I guess because it's all essentially cuboid primitives, it doesn't actually need to collapse anything. But it's good, I'll take it. So, C-deck interior walls. Magellan Class, meshes, technology, lab shelving. Okay. Okay, there's definitely a lot of storage. And then let's just sort out the lights for that. Claire did a good job going around placing all of these, so it would be tradition for me to then mess it all up. How have I ticked the right tick box? To be honest, they're not far off being in the right place already. Thing to bear in mind is that this also has to work from an actual game mechanics perspective. So as much as we could just have long plain shelves that you could just cram loads of stuff onto, from a game perspective it makes it difficult for the game to know that stuff is there, and having discrete isolated shelving pigeonholes makes it easier to address those items from within the game. It's just me making my life easier, basically. I mean, technically, I suppose we could have one collision volume running along the entire length of the shelf, and then just have it just detect if there's anything on there. There's no reason why not, yeah. But this isn't the final look and feel of these. This is just, the first test of the system. We want them to look a little bit more sci-fi than this. So, I mean, what I don't want it to look like is that we've just been to IKEA and bought some shelves and just stuffed them on the ship. So, we'll need to make we'll give them like a rounded cap on the end, maybe put a light on them. Just make them look the part, make them more in keeping with the aesthetic of the ship. Like we'll probably have like little rounded edges on here just to make it look a little bit nicer. But yeah, I mean the programming argument for having single shelves rather than pigeonholes is that we only need to worry about one collision mesh rather than many. Because if we are capturing the transform of the object on the shelf, then we can direct the NPC to that specific location, wherever that object is on the shelf. So see, we can do that anyway, because we can just have our overlap volume just extend the full length of the shelving unit. And to be honest with you, we could have it probably overlap the whole thing, but I guess the issue there, the issue there is that we need to tell the NPC where there is a free gap in order to go and place an item, because they're not going to be clever enough to be able to look at the shelf and go, oh, there's a space there. So by compartmentalizing it into set segments, we can tell the NPC, this one's empty, you can put something there. And we can also run a capacity check on the room as a whole. So obviously I haven't counted them, but there is a finite number of shelving holes in this room, and we can use that to work out capacity and how much capacity remains within the room. So we can have a report on that, and even have like a UI panel in the room here somewhere, maybe on the end of one of these units, or maybe on each unit, that says, you know, what its capacity is and how much capacity is remaining. And the only way we could work that out is if we compartmentalized it into individual discrete segments. Yeah, I mean, visually, we can absolutely just have invisible barriers on the shelf, but that feels a bit hacky. Yeah, there are ways and means, but like I said, when we do the final design of the shelf, it's going to look a lot more sci-fi than this. We'll probably have some like caps on them with lighting, maybe have like alert strips around the top so they'll change color as desired. I won't lift them off the floor any more than this because they're already quite high in terms of reaching the top shelf. But yeah, we've got enough room above them to do some kind of design along the tops. And I like the idea of rounding off the end caps as well with some kind of design. Yeah, ultimately, does the design fit the aesthetic of the ship, and is it practical from a programming perspective? Beyond that, everything's flexible. Oh, I do too, Sirius. Yeah, from an organisational perspective, I would rather have discrete pigeonholes over an unorganised shelf that can just have stuff piled onto it, because I guess it just tends to happen, doesn't it? You've got a shelf, you pile things on it. I like the idea of, especially from a lab environment, having each one of these labelled and used, accordingly. Yeah, there's a reason for that. It's because I made them look like Kallax units. They even have the shiny Kallax plastic. That fresh IKEA smell. Yeah, so the question, of course, is what can we fit on them? starting naturally with beer. Yeah, so that would fit no problem. So things like a mug, that would probably be in the small category. So, you know, we would have smaller shelving to fit small items in terms of their storage. Yep. Plenty of room for something that size. Standard check, will it fit a watermelon? Does not fit a fire extinguisher. Doesn't quite fit a pumpkin. Almost. It's almost pumpkin. I don't know, imagine you could probably squeeze that in. Maybe not. But this is where we'd need to, again, manage the scale of things that we're bringing aboard the ship to make sure that none of them exceed the cube that we need for storage. I think 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters is big enough for a carried object. Yeah, that fits. Now it really does look like IKEA. Yeah, so something, I guess, from a botany perspective, I guess this is where we would go with much taller units. So I guess we'd have slots for, again, cylindrical containers that contain the plants. We'd want them to be, again, self-lit, you know, with their own little water mister or whatever on them. Yeah, I'm sure a skull will fit fine. Okay, and I think I like the idea of doing large cylindrical containers for oceanography as well. We might be able to squeeze 3 tall, because they don't need to be much taller than that, I wouldn't have thought, for oceanography. Yeah, and again, it's about defining the size scales. But we'll take a look at a range of items and then come up with some sensible scales for those items. I think if we go, I suppose, 50 wide by a meter tall as largest, but then when it comes to so things like botany is going to have a lot taller items than it is square, whereas somewhere like geology is probably going to have basically just rocks, so quite square objects, like a boulder. I think oceanography and botany will have the cylinders, so they'll have tanks for storage, and other stuff can have shelves. Like some of the labs are quite awkward, so you've got like the quantum physics lab. I still haven't quite worked out what to do with that one in terms of scienceable objects. Probably that's going to be more scan analysis than physical objects, but we shall have to see. I want to make sure that we do the actual props, because yes, using the actual props does make it more awkward, but I'm quite keen to physicalize everything within the game. So if you go down to a planet and you find an interesting rock that you want to do analysis on, I want that actual same rock to be the thing that you're moving around the ship. So having that rock just in a generic container kind of takes away from the experience a little bit, because then you just have a storeroom full of generic containers rather than, oh look, there's that cool rock I found once. It makes it more of a one-to-one immersive experience. But anyway, let's convert this into something we can actually use. So we already made our shelving unit on the test map. Let's just work out what lab that is. Oh, and also we need to move that door, don't we? So oh, that was biology. Okay. See deck interior walls and snap guides, because we want to be doing some snappage. Two 1 so that'd be 2 1 1 left. It's like the door was never there. Okay, yeah, so being the biology lab, we'll probably have something similar to botany, where rather than having just discrete storage shelves like this, we'll have space for cages and tanks of some kind. So I guess we'll have kind of, I don't know, I'm picturing kind of like Dr. Phlox on Enterprise, having like cages of slugs and stuff everywhere. So maybe something like that. So we'll have set sized animal containers, which should make for an interesting room and probably an interesting smell. Yeah, we'll have like little metal railings on them. But things like the oceanography cylinders, we'll have them so they kind of just lock into place. Maybe have like magnetic bases on them or something. Yeah, well, the storage requirements are obviously going to be different per lab. And I'm just thinking about the probes themselves. So the idea with the probe is it has an interchangeable cargo bay. So you configure the probe for the thing that you're going to sample. So if it's an oceanography probe, then the storage area is obviously designed to hold a water tank. If you're sending it down to capture like a small furry creature, then the storage container needs different equipment. Yes, Sirius, that is my hope. See, my hope in the long run is that there will be an inventory system here where you can, like, maybe on the outside of the room, we could have a UI screen here where you could actually look at like an inventory of what's in there. So if you're looking for a specific item, it will tell you which shelf that item is on. I think that would be quite cool and immersive. And again, looking at it from a real world perspective, that's the kind of thing we'd have, some kind of inventory system to track what's actually in storage. So if shelf A2 has something listed that should be there and it's not there, then obviously something's gone wrong either with record keeping or someone's carried the item off. So yeah, so we need those systems built into it. Yeah, it's going to be, I think, standardized per lab rather than across the ship as a whole, because each lab has different requirements. So if this one was biology, then, or it is biology, then these need to be a different size, because we need to start thinking about storing things in cages or storing things in tanks. I guess like any Wayland Yutani worth its salt would have. Okay, yeah, so let's have a look at what we need botany-wise. Yeah, well, you can't really have a standard canister because a fish has different requirements to a ferret. So, yeah, it's... I guess it's all about scale of object, isn't it? So, plants, we can probably have a standard plant container, like a large one for large plants, a small one for like small little shrubbery things. But you need a completely different class of container for a different thing. So if we were going something like that, let's go 20. So we'd have something, I guess, kind of that sized. And then like how many of those can we fit in the space that we have available? So storage in that instance could probably come up a bit taller, so we could get away with that. So that would be 85. So if we would come up one of those and a half. So we can't make them a meter, because then we could only ever have 2 of them. Yeah, so if we go for our 250, so that's definitely the maximum height we could do. If we divide that into 3, then the maximum height for any canister would be that. Yeah, so I think for meaningful storage, we could probably only fit 2 of those particular ones. Okay, so if we were to make those 1 meter tall, and if we're making them a meter tall, we can probably make them bigger. So we go 25 radius, so that's half a meter by a meter, so they're twice as tall as they are wide. That feels like a decent size for a plant and or a fish tank. Although I've I've carried my fair share of full fish tanks, and it's remarkable how heavy they get when they're full of water. So like a fish tank which was this size, you probably wouldn't be able to lift. I mean, they're super heavy. Well, what we do for something like this is we would have a dedicated storage container which conforms to the contours of the item. So if we were to come out, say, no, out, not in, I guess about an inch, group that up, I guess come across the middle there. Let's expand that out again. So our storage compartment will probably look something like that, where rather than shelves, we'll have compartments where we put the actual tanks. So then that becomes a question of how many tanks can we fit in that space. Yeah, so space-wise, we could probably fit something like that. And then on top of that, we'd have another row. Are you storing random alien flora? That's the question. Yeah, but it's about transport, isn't it, at that point? Like, and fitting it inside the pod. So when we send the probe down, obviously these things have to fit in the probe, because these canisters that would be here would be the canisters that you're physically pulling out of the probe. So, you know, logistics need to be considered. Hey, Mark. Yep, that is our standard unit of measurement. Okay, yeah, so 2 rows of 1 meter tall tanks does take up all of the available space, with a bit to spare, so certainly within space considerations. And if we grab our dude for scale, yeah, so a human being would really struggle to carry that much water unless they were very, very strong. Okay. That would explain why, while carrying the 50 centimeter by 50 centimeter cube tanks are so damn heavy. Because if that's 100 kg, then yeah, that struggles. Getting them up the stairs was a nightmare. Yeah, we'll have some kind of little trolley to move things around with as well, because it would be nice to be able to load up some kind of pushable device where you can put things on to move them around. I'll tell you when autosave stops autosaving. SketchUp's usually quite good at telling you things like volume. It is 0.2 meters cubed. Which oddly doesn't sound right, because if it's 50 centimeters wide and 100 tall, no, it doesn't sound right somehow. Hang on, let's take that in isolation. So if we've got 0.2 meters square for the surface area, then if we make that a cylinder, oh, it must be right. Yeah, 0.2 meters cubed. So yeah, so I would say in terms of sizing, that would be considered large. And then anything, I guess half that would be medium. And then we'll go for smaller ones for small containers. I guess we'll have like standard ocean sample containers as well. And things like core samples, I suppose. I guess for a geology lab, I suppose a core sample would be relevant for that. But yeah, I think if we go with that for both oceanography and botany as well, because we'll fit plants into those containers, and I guess we'll make unique assets that fit within those bounds. So we'll have to make sure that when we do procedural plants, the leaves aren't like poking out through the glass and such. And I suppose from a safety perspective and a dealing with parasites perspective, if these are sealed units, so they're sealed when the sample is taken on the planet's surface and they remain sealed until you open them, then they're good for transit, because as long as you don't open the thing, the exterior has been sterilized within the pod anyway. So you would just open it in whatever secure environment there is within the lab complex itself. As long as you just don't open it in here, then you should be good. True. So I suppose it makes sense in that regard to have the big ones in the middle of the room. I guess where you've got a bit more room to maneuver. Yeah, then have maybe the smaller ones around the outside. It is LUD, yes. So this is attached to the lab. So this is essentially your lab storage for all the samples that have either been scienced or are pending science. I'll see you, Jim. Have a good one. I guess the other thing we need... So I'm thinking about the act of actually going through the process of fully sciencing an object. Again, certain objects will have certain different science disciplines. Some will have multiple science disciplines. So we need a way of tracking just how much they've been worked on for that science discipline. So we could potentially have a little UI with a readout on it that says that. So I don't know whether that's kind of over gamifying the storage container a little bit, or whether or not we just have that only readable if you actually perform, or you put it in some kind of machine, and that machine says we understand X percentage of this item, and then obviously to unlock the full 100%, you need to do the science activities on it. Oh, here. This is going to be for the life support hardware. Yeah, again though, PSV, we're making a game, so you need to think about it from gameplay perspective. As much as like in the real world, like samples will probably even be smaller than that. We'd like take a test tube, but like from a gameplay perspective, we want handling of physical samples to be a thing. And I don't know, it's not very rewarding just having a tiny little test tube sample or like a little cube of something. You need something you can physically pick up and carry around. Like if you've got a rock that you're working on, when you're done with it, it's nice to then put that rock on a shelf somewhere. So we need to think about it in terms of gameplay as much as realism. Yeah. So if we were making it half the size, maybe slightly less than half, then something like, so that would be the 100, that would be 80. Yeah, we also have robots. Not in SketchUp, no. Although when I drag it in Engine, you can see. So the biggest one is 50. I guess 30 does feel like a decent size for the next size down. Something like that maybe. Because we can fit 3 of them stacked. I suppose that's a good way of working it out, by how many you can stack. So there's more than enough room for stacking 3 tall there. And then maybe keep the same width. Potentially go half the height. Maybe something like that. Yeah, big one's 50. Guess I'd make the medium size one maybe 40. Yeah, so 40 by 80 sticks to the same idea of it being twice as tall as it is wide. So medium would be that size. So then, so if that was 20, so 50, 40, so then the smallest would be 30, which means it would be 60 tall. So they need to be a bit smaller. As would they. Okay. Yeah, I think handling the oceanography ones specifically by literage is not a bad shout. It would certainly make it easier to track the size of them, and we can put the literage actually on the container then, which makes sense. These ones are what I'm doing right now for botany, so I'm just thinking in terms of plant and how large a plant would be. Obviously these ones won't be full of water, so they're not going to be that heavy. It's more just a plant pot surrounded by perspex. Now I think size-wise they work. Let's just take off a bit of the height. We can make that fit, that's fine. And then these ones would have to be slightly smaller as well. Maybe not that much smaller. Yeah, it's about perfect, to be honest. I think that'll about do us for those. I might take off a tiny bit height on these ones. Let's try dropping them down by 5. See whether that makes them a little bit more in keeping with the other two. Yeah, there we go. It's more like it. Yeah, so we can stack 2 high, 3 high, and 4 high on our shelving units, and then have small, medium, and large plants accordingly. Thank you, Sirius. I just component these up a minute. Now, in order to make this I guess more like an actual container of sorts. If we double up on that, something like that maybe, and then we'll have like grow space in the middle here, so we make that see through. So something not unlike that. Probably with double doors that slide open just to get access to it. Yeah, so probably, so it opens basically halfway. So doors at the front, slide round, and then you can just like pull it out. One plant container. So if we were to stick to the same overall scaling of this, then that gives us an increasing grow area. Yeah, so the internals, in terms of space for the roots, I guess we'll have like a little internal water tank there somewhere, which just kind of keeps it saturated, and then have like a grow light in the top. So it's a self-contained thingamabobber. Yeah, something like that. This is basically the storage containers for botany samples, or at least scale testing for such, because we need to, when we're doing the storage room like this, we need to think about the different size classes of objects that we're pulling up from the surface, and then how much physical space we need to actually store those items. Just do this one a sec. So again, we'll stick to the same scale for the hardware components. which is giving us increasingly larger actual space for the plant. It is biology, yes, but I was just riffing with it, really, just going with my whim. I was just doing this out of interest. I was just thinking in terms of when we're looking at plant samples, just what kind of plants we're going to fit into these containers. I guess this one would be small plants, whereas this would be small bushes. But we're going to have to make sure, again, that when we do the procedural meshes for these, that the procedural asset that fits inside these has to take the radius into account, so we're not having leaves poking through. Because I know that both myself and Claire have a particular hatred for geometry poking through other geometry. These are surface samples, though, so the medium that the roots would be in would have been taking from the planetary surface. So the probe would scoop up the plant, including its root structure, and put that in the container. I guess from a science perspective, you're going to be interested in the soil that it's growing in just as much as the plant itself, because you'll want to test the soil to see what the chemical composition of the soil is like, etc., etc. So these are sample containers, not growing containers. The presence of water and a grow light is there for keeping it alive. Okay, well, we can stretch them up and down as needed. Alright, so let's get rid of that a minute. Yeah. Again, though, like, there's only so deep we can go with this. As I keep pointing out, this is a game we're making. We're not making an actual science lab with actual health and safety and those kind of procedures. It's going to have to be gamified to some extent. It would take an atmospheric sample, yes. So the idea is the probe will just literally grab the plant, put it in the sample container, root ball and all, including its atmosphere, seal the container, and then that's what gets brought up to the ship, literally as is. So when you would open the container on the ship, it would contain everything that was on the surface, including any creepy crawlies that happened to be there. Yeah, so the storage would look somewhat like that. Yeah, generally speaking, the idea is that the probe will land above the thing that it's taking a sample of, and basically, as Dave says, it will just basically get the cylinder and just go over the top of it, like extract like the entire root ball, all the mud, everything that the plant's growing on, and seal that in the container. So you're taking a literal snapshot of where that plant is growing. So everything that is like keeping that plant alive, or the very purpose for it growing there in the first place, is all captured within the sample. Oh, absolutely, Madman, and that's part of the gameplay. So we want there to be circumstances whereby you've brought something aboard the ship that you weren't planning to, and gameplay ensues. Like, if the whole thing was sterile from beginning to end, with absolutely zero risk of contamination, then where's the fun in that? Where are we adding the gameplay? Where's the drama coming from? It can't be completely sterile. So, we need opportunity for mistakes to happen. We need opportunity for there to be an outbreak of alien bugs on the ship, or some kind of alien virus for sickbay to deal with. Those things are what make gameplay, so we can't avoid those things. Exactly, tribbles. We want tribbles. Exactly. So if I go with a standard base size and a standard top, then I guess we need to work out the exact height for the number that we're stacking, and then we need to just fudge the height of the container slightly to fix that, to fit that space. So if we were going, oops, hang on, how big are these ones? So that's 11 centimeters. If we were to standardize that to 10, so then we'd have the top piece that was there, and then a base that was 10. With a gap there. So that's 75, that's 62.5, yeah, so that's going to have to be ever so slightly smaller. So if we I guess we need to make that a cap. Actually, that doesn't even need the middle, does it? Of course not. Right, so if that's the top of the unit and the gap between, but if I component that up, so something like that. So our measurements, so it's 230, so that would be 220. Including the top cap. So dividing that by 4, that gives the height for each one of 55 exactly. So it means that this needs to fit in its entirety into a height of 55. Which means that needs to come up to there. That needs to come up. Oops. Are they not? No, they're not. Right, so that's the total allowable height, which means that would also have to come up to there. I guess we'll do that as well, just to overlapping. Okay, so if we are stacking them that tall, and then that one actually, let's just get rid of all those bits a minute. So that's one unit. So 4 of them high plus the end cap in total should measure 230 centimeters, which it does exactly. Huzzah. Okay, so that's four high for our storage. So that's the small one. And then we need to do the same thing for the medium size and the large. So make sure that the stack height equals the same height of all the other racks, and maintains the same kind of spacing around each one. And obviously we will smooth that off and make it all lovely as part of the process. Right, so if we just group them together a minute. So that's our 4 stack. Greetings, Walper. Okay, so same thing. Give a 2 centimeter fresh air gap, then a 1 inch thickness. So that'd be a 2 inch border between each one. Yes, I use centimeters and inches interchangeably. It's a curse. Okay, so we have a 1 inch gap at the top. And then that would be our cavity surround. Make sure it's actually lined up properly. And there's our top and middle bit. Right, so same thing then. This time we want to scale the height of this so that it stacks smoothly 3 high. So if we measure 220 to take into account the cap. Sorry, 3 high. So I'm going to divide that by 3, which is awkwardly 73.333. So 73.333, that's how tall it can be, totals. Actually, no, not from there. From there. That's how tall it can be, totals. So we're going to have to bring it up a little bit to there. Let's make sure these are all grouped. So if we raise this up to the same height as this one, and we get rid of the end cap, just make sure that's all component, which it is, and we should be able to copy that down twice, and it should reach the floor exactly. Good. And I've just noticed that bit also needs adjusting. Okay, so we're maintaining the same gap, sort of air gap around everything, both top sides, and we're maintaining the same thickness of top cap and separation, and just to keep it all sort of all visually consistent. So the only thing that's changing is the radius and the size of the physical container. So we'll probably have to do a bit of squinting with this one as well to get it all lined up exactly. Thanks, Madman. Yeah, I've been using it for about 10 years, so it's I guess you pick up a few things along the way. Let's just move this up here a minute so I'm not constantly getting trapped in geometry. Same again, 2 centimeter gap. And 2.5 there. I'll do that again without removing the interface because it was not happy with that. It's better. So same process again, same overall shape. comes down to the bottom of that. Make that a group. Then that comes up to meet that. Pull that up. Remove the faces, make it bigger, fix the hole. See the top separation there. There we go. Right then. And this time we just need to divide this by 2. So 220 is going to be 110, isn't it? I don't even need to measure that. So from there to there should be 110. Yeah, so we need to make it ever so slightly smaller, but not by much. So we move this one up to be in line with that one, and that should stack on top of itself exactly the right amount. Hurrah! No gaps, no overlap. So there we go, small, medium and large, and they all stack to the same height. Okay, so I'm going to take the existing lab that we've got there, and I'm going to rotate that out of the way, and we'll keep that safe over on this side. So that means we can work on our storage solution for this lab specifically. Obviously this is what was this? This was botany, wasn't it? So not botany, biology. So I think what we'll do is, I guess, keep the same size containers for our biological samples as well, because I suppose you'd have small critters in one of these and kind of expand the size of the creature as you go up. I guess the only downside to that is we're not really increasing surface area. Okay, so if those are our plant storages, and I think we'll go with the same size for our fish tank storages. To be honest, we can probably work out the literage on that. Hang on, if we make that a component a minute. Work on it over here. Okay, so that's 0.16 meters cubed. And let's see what that is in liters. 160. Oh, of course, would be, wouldn't it? So, yeah, so these are 160 litre tanks. So let's do the same for the other ones. In fact, I'm going to... Oh no, I can't stick a label on it. I was going to stick a label on it, but I shan't for now. It'd help if I could draw a straight line. Would help if I was in the group. Okay, so that's 0.02. And what's that, 20? Yeah, 20 litres. Okay, so the smallest one is 20 litres. And then finally, we'll do this one. And that one is 60 litres. Okay, so we've got 20, 60 and 160 in terms of volume. Yeah, whale tank will have to be somewhere else. But again, in terms of surface area, as much as there's a large water column, if you have a big fish, the fish don't tend to swim up and down, they tend to swim left and right. So we'll have a think on that. Maybe we'll have like slightly wider ones, maybe? Don't know, we'll think on it. Again, ultimately, it is a game, and there's only so far we can go with it in terms of like realism. Right, so we've got our IKEA units, we've got our storage for these ones. See, it would be nice if we had like a unified depth. so that we can have them stored alongside each other. So here we can store big tanks and medium-sized tanks in the same shelving space. So if we do the same with these, let's make sure that they are aligned. Yeah, then we can just pull out the backs of them so that they all match. Yeah, well, the whole point of having science on the ship is ultimately for upgrades. So, as much as doing science is kind of the purpose of this particular ship, there has to be an in-game point for it as well. So, there'll be direct upgrade paths by discovering new and better materials for when you 3D print things. So, the example I tend to use is like the cabling. You start off with just standard copper cabling, which has a certain amount of conductivity at room temperature. You can find a material that has better room temperature conductivity than copper, and there's going to be a spectrum of materials which have better and better conductivity, which means that those cables get progressively stronger, they can take higher voltages and generally break and wear out less. So by replacing the cabling with a better grade of cable, you're just directly upgrading the capacity on the ship. And the same will be true for things like the batteries, like the engine components, like everything will be upgradable simply by 3D printing spare parts using better materials than the ones you started with. No, everything will be upgradable on the fly. We're still toying with the idea of some things being a catastrophic loss, so things like the fusion reactor. So there will be aspects of the fusion reactor where if it is destroyed, that's pretty much it, game over. There's no way of recovering from that, but other aspects of the fusion reactor will be replaceable. So there'll be like the core reaction chamber will be something that is going to require a space dock to fix, whereas things like the beam injectors and such, those are things that you can just shut down the reactor, replace the beam injectors, carry on along your way. Because we want there to be the point where there has to be a decision-making process you have to think to yourself, do we keep exploring or do we turn tail and head back to Earth? Because if you make the decision to turn and head home too late, then you've got to the point where you're limping the ship home, you've got hardly any crew left, everything's falling apart around you, and you may struggle to actually get back to Earth, and it could result in a game over. So we want that kind of command decision making importance where there's actual risk versus reward of staying out exploring longer. But we will delve into that and flesh that out once we have like the full suite of working ship systems. Yeah, because ultimately the idea is that you're going out on missions. So you start from Earth, you go off and on a mission of exploration, and then at some point you have to turn around and go back to Earth, hand in that mission, report your progress, how many first contacts did you make, how much science did you conduct, and then you will refit backfill crew that you've lost, restock, and then go out on another mission with the same ship and crew, only this time you're more capable than last time. And just, rinse and repeat, and getting better and better each time, going further and further each time, going into more and more dangerous areas each time. So yes, there will definitely be some things which do require space dock. Yes, yeah. So our UN space fleet is certainly on the science vessels predominantly civilian. So like all the scientists will be civilian. Probably half the engineers, if not all the engineers, will be civilian. Maybe like the chief engineer and a couple of like engineers mates might not be, but the idea is that the non-military vessels are like 80-90% civilians. And I'm looking at it in terms of like the merchant navy, I guess. Obviously I've never served in any navy and know very little about it, but the UN as an organization is basically making multinational crews for all of its vessels. The military vessels will be fully 100% military personnel, but those military personnel will be very multinational, sourced from all of the member states. And again, the science vessels, the trading vessels, anything which is doing a job for the UN, whether or not it's military personnel is very much job dependent. Like when it comes to like some of the cargo cruisers, they might just be contractors. They might not even be under the UN banner, but they're working for the UN under contract. So it's going to be a mix of both, basically. Yeah, and alien tech is definitely going to be a factor because we want to be able to retrofit the ship with like an alien FTL drive. So we're going to have multiple ways of traversing the galaxy. There'll be things like traditional hyperspace, like you see in Star Wars, or more advanced hyperspace like you see in Babylon 5. Things like jump gates, artificial wormholes, interdimensional travel. We'll have lots and lots of different ways of getting from A to B through the galaxy, and different alien races will do it in different ways themselves. So if you research their tech and you find enough of their hardware, you'll be able to retrofit your ship with their hardware to travel the galaxy the same way they do. So you'll be able to abandon warp as an old technology and move to hyperspace instead, for example. Yep, we will definitely have to see. And this is where, gameplay happens. We shall have to see. But this is what we're doing. We're creating opportunities for gameplay. Okay, so the question with this is how many of each type of container do we put in any given area? Let's just group those up and extract them. Sure, that is a component. Okay, same with this one. I want to grab that and that, group it up, extract it. so the actual depth there is almost 60 centimeters, so it's slightly deeper than the 50 that we had before. That one's almost 50, so yeah, it's about equivalent of the other units we made. How big is that? Okay. So what I'll do is I'll grab that face. And I'll make that our corner piece. Though I shall need to measure that angle. So that should be perfectly square. I suppose the unknown factor in this is how many of those units we can fit side by side along each length. So we might need to extend the corner pieces to cater for that. Obviously, especially we oh, thank you, Sirius. Yeah, you're quite right. Best to cater for that as well while we're at it. Yeah, so the bracing that goes against the metalwork there sticks out 5 centimeters, so just need to make sure that we make allowances for that. Otherwise we will find ourselves having to squidge something up and then it not fitting. Well remembered. Okay, we can get rid of those for a minute. Future Dan is always grateful for the help. Just wondering why that didn't line up then. Of course it's because it doesn't stick out the same amount. So this is of course a problem because we can't put the other one directly next to it. So I'm wondering whether or not we have a diagonally facing one in the corner. Could work. I guess ideally we need kind of the same number of storage racks for each type of sized container, because if we've got 50 small containers stored, then we could need a similar or equal number of large containers. Maybe not that many. so we have all the little ones on the back wall there, and maybe all the medium-sized ones along this wall. And then we can have the big ones all through the middle. That would be reasonably funny, Delta. Yeah. I can imagine two plants screeching at each other in two separate jars. Well, what you're suggesting there, Dave Soft, isn't necessarily impossible, because if we can separate these out into the same sized footprint, then we could potentially have two of these, or two of those with a bit of spare space either side, or one of these with a bit more spare space each side, so that you can configure each storage rack to contain either 6 of them, or 8 of them, or 2 of them. So you can, you could choose how much of each thing to store potentially. So these can easily go back to back. So that would be in the middle there, and then the other two would have to be there-ish. Let's say 300 for now, just to see. That gives us distance between each one of 1.8 meters, which is enough for an NPC to blunder around. Okay, so if we line this up with the middle, then it should be equal to the middle of this wall here. So it's going to have to be 8 of them. Kyle agrees. Yeah, I definitely think we need something in the corner there that's better than that. And I've just realised I've neglected to move these far enough from the wall, because I always do. I suppose the cleanest way of handling this if we can just, I guess, turn that into our just curved corner there. So if we put that on there, again, make allowance for the gap. Just to make it a bit nicer, we could maybe do something like that. Yeah, something like that. Just so we'll just round it off in the corner, and then we can just extend those sides depending on how much space we need. 195. Almost exactly 200, so if we make it exactly 200, then it should be practically that on the other side as well. That gives us our 2-meter walkway, which is the kind of space we need for NPCs to not mess about with each other and get stuck and all that sort of stuff. Should have a similar gap here at 1.6. Should be enough. Okay, yeah, so if we just reserve the center of the room for the really, really big containers, yeah, I'll stick with the little ones on that side, medium-sized ones each end, and then maybe a mix of small and medium across here. I guess we need to count them and see how many we've got. So what's that? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's 48, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 12 times 4 is 48, isn't it? So it's 48. Can't be bothered to work out 48 times 2, so I'll use a calculator. So 96. We've got 96 little ones. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. That's 51 times 2 is 102. So we've got 102 medium, 96 small, so they're fairly equal in number. So I guess we'll do like a reasonably equal number of them along here as well. And then for these ones, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's 18 times 3. That's 54 big ones. That's not a bad distribution, to be honest. Let's add these into the group. What's the best way of doing this? I guess if we do the small ones in the middle, yeah, potentially. The issue is more one of the need for storage. We're probably going to need more than we've even got here, so I think storage is going to be running very much at a premium when it comes to these labs. Once we start bringing stuff up from planets, these storage rooms are going to fill up very, very quickly. And I suppose it depends on how quickly we're getting through the science, because at some point the storage room is going to be full, and then you're not going to have room to bring things up from planetary surfaces. So you need to get through the science, get the objects done and out. And then, as I said, either discard or store somewhere else. Not in here, Del. So this is just the storeroom. All the lab stuff's going to be in here. And we'll put a UI screen on the wall on the outside, I think, for stock keeping. It's almost exactly the right amount. Okay, so that would be the full room. So then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So what's that? So that's another 44 on top of the 96. So that's 140 small ones. And we got 100 and something of them. Plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's 14. Times 3, that's 42. So yeah, to be honest, so we've got 140-ish medium, 140 small, so they're practically equal in number, and then 50 odd big ones. Well, I suppose another interesting point on that is that, yeah, whilst it's like morally fine to chuck a plant in the bin when you're done with it, if you've brought up like some alien creature from the planet's surface and then you've like walked off somewhere else and you're busy exploring elsewhere, and then it comes to performing science on that creature to work out what it is and what makes it tick, what do you do with it afterwards? Like, you're not going to hurt it, so like, do you chuck it in the furnace? I mean, where does the little critter go? Right, so let's export this then. So this is lab shelving, and this one was the biology specifically. Yeah, in an ideal world, but I guess that's like a captain's decision for the captain in charge. It's like, because if you've got a bunch of samples from the surface, but then you've gone elsewhere because, you know, they're in the queue to be looked at, and you've already got 50 other things in the queue waiting to be scienced, then you could be long gone from that area before you ever get around to actually looking at them. So yeah, and then what? Do you just put them down on a planet which it kind of roughly matches their conditions? It's just an interesting moral part of this. Like, you know, or if you're doing live samples, do you ensure that you only do them while you're in orbit and then put them back afterwards? Right, so let's replace our IKEA units with the tube version. So I imagine the collision meshes on these is not going to be as nice as our IKEA units. There we go. That's the garbage I was looking for. Right, let's fix that up a little bit. We'll just increase this until it gets too wonky looking. That'll about do, I reckon. Right, so if we take that one around out the way a minute, then we bring in our biology one. It's the kind of thing we'd be looking at. Now obviously we will sci-fi this up and make it look nice, but in terms of just the physical space used, I think this is pretty much the kind of space we're going to be looking at for storage. And then in terms of operations, yeah, so stuff's going to have to come in from the probe room here. So the full sequence of events, if I can get control of my camera. So probe comes in, there'll be a big airlock here that it comes in at. It will land on one of its pads, maybe here, and then the objects will be removed from the probe and they'll be placed over here on what will be some storage racks. So there will be equivalent storage racks here for things which have been offloaded from the probes. The deck crew will then take those objects and deliver them to whichever room, whichever science lab matches their science category. So they'll come around here, go into the lab, and they'll put that in one of the shelving units, waiting to be looked at. The science NPCs will go into the storeroom and grab things which require science. They'll then take those things to the science machinery and perform science on those things. When they're done performing science on them, they will take them into here and deposit them back in the storage shelves. Now the question we then need to ask is what happens when all the shelves are full up. Now they will just dump the object on the floor, which is fine, but that's only fine for a limited period of time before the room fills up. So I guess we need some process in place for dealing with how the NPCs will automate that when the player's not around. Because if as the player you're simply playing as the captain, or you're playing tactical or an engineer, you're not going to be interested in what the science labs are doing. You're not going to want to go and micromanage that. So you need to trust that the science labs are being managed. So they're going to have to recycle stuff that's been done. Which leads us to that whole moral question of, are we recycling little hamsters? We'll have to think on that one. We will definitely be storing data on every single thing that's been discovered. We can probably generate imagery of it on the fly as well, because the assets that you bring up from the surface are going to be seed driven. So the procedural system that makes them will obviously rely on that seed to do the physical representation of the object. So when you look up that item after the fact, that seed will be stored as part of the data. So we can, in the background, regenerate the object, take a picture of it for a render target, and then display that on screen in 2D, thus calling up an image of every single thing you've ever scanned. Because all we actually need to keep a reference of is the seed, and then we can reconstruct the data afterwards. Same with 3D printing those objects as well. So if you find a particularly nice vase or whatever on an alien planet, then you'll be able to print out copies of it using the 3D printer once it's been fully scanned. So again, that will rely on the seed in order to do that. We will look into it and pick the the least morally ambiguous result. But so there we go. That's what we're going to be dealing with storage-wise, and then we'll have a look at whether or not the small, medium, and large has like gameplay relevance. Like, is there a benefit of a large object versus a small object beyond storage space? We'll have a look at that as well. But so I think that will do us for tonight. We are over time, so what did we do? So we've got shelving set up there for tubes. We have other shelving set up here for not tubes. Let's get rid of the old shelves in there. So some of the labs, like geology, will just have storage for rocks and things. But we'll use slightly more purposeful storage for botany and the oceanography labs and such. You are welcome, Delta. It is always a pleasure. And on that happy note, I shall wish you all a good rest of the week, and I will see you on Friday for more random Friday shenanigans. Right, have a great week ahead, and see you then. Bye for now.